Hello, once again. It's time for episode 3 of The Craft of Gaming with your host, Bill Hannings. It's going to be a fun one tonight. I'm going to try to make it quick, but no promises. This one may be pretty long. It's something I care about a lot, which is writing for a character. So I already talked a bit about this when I was talking about character creation. Now we're going to get very deep into it. A lot more so than just matching a character to a setting and a group. Tonight I'm going to talk about how a character story gets written, how you can draw inspiration for them, how to develop them from questions, where do you write your character stuff, and what you do with them once the game is over. So let's talk about the first thing, which is where you get inspiration for them. This is my most common inspiration for a character, and that is music. Var, who I've already talked about in episode 0, his personality in particular is based off of music from Bastille, various bits of music from other composers and performers. I often listen to her playlist. I've made one, and I will list it in the comments when I'm writing for her. I do this for Grimkel Eirson and Vor Dal as well. Less often for Penn, although I've made one for him, because he doesn't get as much writing after an initial character creation as a very not heavy in between games LARP, which is Forgotten Empire, the Star Wars LARP. The first thing is, after that, which is, music inspiration and stuff, the big questions. What question are you trying to answer with each character? I mean, obviously, we can only answer the questions in the realm of the fictional universe that they're exploring, but this question is always important when you're playing someone. You don't do it, it's very rare that you play someone without a purpose as such. And the big one that I've always found for me when I'm working with fiction is answering a question that I've written through the interaction with the world, the storytellers, and the other characters. I always have a question that I answer in this course of this role play, and then the course of an extended campaign or LARP that doesn't end or doesn't end for a while, I'll come up with new ones. For example, in terms of like an immediate goal, we've got Valdis Var V Draconis, Valdis Var Dolores V Draconis. I forget part of her name part of the time. She's an examination of privilege, how someone who's brought up in it can fight against their own worst impulses and their own bad decisions in order to become a better person. Also, she's sort of an examination of how someone with a overbearing personality can slowly learn to fit in better with others. Also, I work with, how someone who has a compulsion to gamble can really badly mess up their own life while they're struggling with that. Example 2, Penn Wardell. He's a character who plays around a lot with PTSD and drug addictions, some things that I study and work with at my job. If you know, it's because I've told you. But I don't really talk about these things at length on social media, so I'm not going to get into my job here. Those who know. Those who don't, it's not a big issue other than I get exposed to people from those categories. Because of the sensitivity of these subjects and issues, I'm trying my best to be very considerate in how I play and portray what's going on with him. And I always welcome feedback if you have concerns about how I'm playing him. I am doing my best, and I'm not trying to play a stereotype, so for what it's worth, I sincerely love playing him, and I welcome criticism and feedback, and I'll adjust my roleplay accordingly. Example 3, Vor Dal's question. Vor is very far past related to Penn. That's a different episode, which I'll cover in our time. And his big question is, can a man overcome being framed for a crime he didn't commit? And the ongoing question of whether or not he's going to fall entirely into a life of crime, forget his loyalties and ideals, and whether money will ever get in the way of the family that he's acquired by blood and by friendship in the course of his character existence. Example 4, Grimkel Eirson. Now this is a big one because he's a long-term LARP campaign character that in the LARP campaign, as far as I know, is not ending anytime soon. And the big questions for him initially were, how does someone who's lived in the shadow of their brother manage to overcome their own feelings of inferiority and carve out a space for himself? After I did that, I sort of moved in another direction with him He began contemplating and exploring if a man entirely defined by warriorhood and martial skill and the copious amounts of blood that he could spill on any given battle could manage to help someone, not by fighting, but by, with words, persuading others to help someone who was in danger and who was afflicted, and contribute efforts to his own crazy plan to help this person out of love and concern for them. Now, this question has been answered too. It was successful, by the way. And I'm moving to answering what can a man do when the major things that have been impelling him on his heroic journey are done, and the only thing left is duty, and how do you sort of, on an in-game level, overcome the burnout of a long-term campaign character who's sort of achieved a whole bunch of goals and done really awesome things. So it's interesting to play up that sort of like in-universe burnout and exhaustion and find, and seek for new meaning in life. 3. When you're writing your character, you should at least consider their mindset. Even put yourself into it. I mean, method acting isn't for everyone, but it helps for me when I'm writing my characters, since a lot of it's first person, to write from their perspective. Are they a soldier? Are they introspective, passive, aggressive? Are they particularly well educated? There are lots of questions you need to answer at this point when you're thinking in that mindset. As for how I tend to write characters, I sort of write them as writers. In other words, they're writing letters or communications with other people, and often this leads to them becoming rather introspective characters. Even the passive, passionately emotional ones like Grimkel and Var, there's always a level of like consideration that comes from my own tendency to be very pensive about things, but also comes from the introspective nature of the letters that they're writing to other people. It's just sort of an outgrowth, and I've accepted it's sort of an ongoing thing with every character that I play. The other sort of ongoing thing is that almost all of my characters are total badasses in some way. And I don't say this as a boast, it's just I don't tend to play characters that are ineffectual in the fields that I choose to portray them in. I don't particularly enjoy portraying someone who's always helpless in a given situation. Vulnerability and weakness and helplessness in a situation that they're not familiar with or can't deal with is great. That can make for some really interesting role play. But when they're in their element, I like to play with someone who's incredibly competent at something. So then I consider how characters view the world. Grim, for example, until recently viewed everyone as a weapon. Var views the world, viewed the world as a place to carve out joy and things worth having until recently. And Vor and Pen don't really honestly have that sort of unified worldview that some of my other characters have, being more concerned with the practicalities of family, friendships, and in the case of one of them, getting off a world where they're stranded with no functioning hyperdrive capable ships. Boy, that sucks. But I love Darafin, Forgotten Empire. It is a fantastic charity LARP. Please play. So what's your purpose when you're writing these characters? Like, they've got a question, you've got a mindset, you've got story. What are the purpose of the writing other than, just I'm writing stories about my character to keep in contact with them between games. For Var, it's specifically the purpose is the letters she writes to her family and her ex-lover in order to keep them informed of her present life in Lycombe. Like, it's something that I can kind of do that leads to character development in game. I know that my GM reads them. I assume at some point he'll start writing me back or having in-game reactions to the letters my character is sending. For Grimkel, it was letters to someone he loves, and more recently, letters and forum posts that he writes in his capacity as a noble or as a guardsman, depending on the time period. For Vor Dao, it's more of a confessional data pad chronicling his life in the relationships and the slow downward spiral into like becoming basically a brutal leg breaker for a crime lord as he attempts to maintain the few good things in his life that aren't covered by the grime of constantly breaking laws for survival and money out on the outer rim. It can be for some rough reading, but it's fun to play someone who's dealing with really stressful stuff. For some of the past characters I've played, I've written things like recollections of history they've been involved in for a war veteran, which ended up getting rewritten as Penny Dreadful novels that got popular and published, though his literary agent cheated him, which was another party member, which made it extra funny they got most of the actual money. I find that writing for my characters most often comes in the form of an in-game journal or letters, though writing in the third person as a chronicler who's recounting the heroic or not so heroic deeds of your character can also be great fun. I would recommend trying that. It is just sort of a narrative exercise sometime. You sort of get to create the character of the chronicler who is then viewing externally your character in the course of their life. So at this point, you've got questions, you've got the purpose and mode of their writing, you've got the organic things that happen once they're in game. Now let's talk about the meta uses of your in-character writing for you as you role play. It's a really good chance to reflect on how the character is changing and reacting, possibly even a way of hinting at future plot lines and character actions, especially if your GM is reading everything that you write, which I do recommend, or a chance to put out and think about their plans, triumphs, pains, that kind of stuff. Put it all to page. It's a fantastic record and way to remember what you did in any given game, things like dates, timelines, names, or even distances traveled. This can all be pretty useful stuff to be able to recite back to the GM to give them help as you're gaming with them. And since gaming is cooperative, why not have that resource available for them? Although, when it comes down to it, the primary use, meta and otherwise, of writing for a character is catharsis and further development of that character in your mind. It's also great, on a practical level, for remembering what you did last session in a way that's more readable than the horrible notes that you scribbled on the back of a character sheet. I'm very sorry, Justin Whitmore. I know Var's sheet is a hilarious, chaotic mess of jottings on the back, but I promise if you read her letters, it's a much more concise view of what's going on with a lot of names. So then you've got reasons for writing character, you've got all the other stuff I've talked about, but where do you write it? Where do you put it? Because there's, we live in a modern society. There's so many ways to write. You can write in a physical journal. Once again, I'm using my favorite prop here. You can write down on a computer file, like a Word document or something. I will find that I tend to prefer something like a Google Doc, something that I can share with my GM, particularly if I'm a character writing letters to an NPC or another PC. If you're going for more of a journal thing, it's good to just keep it around as a reminder to the GM/storyteller/DM, whatnot, of what your character has done and what they intend to do and how they're feeling. This is also a useful tool for cooperative gaming, which in the end is what most roleplay ends up being. If you're not playing with another person, you're just sort of talking to yourself. With a shared piece of writing, even that innermost dialogue of a character is subject to narrative review, and the GM can reward you with interactions with the world along with themes that you've set out in your character journeys and journals and other writing. Like you're giving them feedback through these journals, and that they can sort of like return that back to you with roleplay scenarios that sort of reflect your character's thoughts. Paper journals and letters are excellent for LARP characters, since you might not have the same level of GM or storyteller review of everything you write. I'd like to take a brief aside to apologize to Matt Marjack here. He had to read every letter I wrote to his NPC Lilith, in addition to Alice Bryson, who actually played this said NPC. That must have been a bit silly, reading all these MASH notes after a while, although they did give some hints to Grimm's future plans, which helped you sort of write stuff based on that. Not too many apologies, though. It ended up being probably the most rewarding LARP storyline I've ever played in. Homunculus, plot forever. Love you guys. Thanks for that. Last things last, though. The game's over. What do? You've got this character journal. Well, here's what you've got. A ready-made way of remembering a character that you had a great time with, all the fun it can spark, and further your development of future characters Maybe there were choices that you didn't take that you'd like to explore in the future with a different character. Maybe a theme comes up in the exploration of this journal that is something you want to build a character around. It allows you to sort of take things into the future and tell other stories that stem from the story that you've just been a part of telling. And it's also just a really nice way to remember something like a game that meant something to you. And with that, I'm concluding for the night. Remember to like and subscribe and tune in for every Monday night or Tuesday night for more Craft of Gaming content. And watch for mini episodes and previews throughout the course of the week. I'm undecided on my next episode, but I'll probably have an inkling of what I'm going to be doing on Friday. And I'm going to start branching out into my Harvey Corner, which is going to be books, games, anime reviews soon enough. Also, get excited. I'm going to have actual microphones soon, webcams, and maybe even some video editing software. All my love here. Bill out. Have a great week, folks.